Welcome back to my YouTube channel. This is Greg Kaiser, and I wanted to take a few minutes to talk with you about something that I think is going to bring a little bit more to a blog entry that I've just done. So if you haven't already checked it out, there's a link in the description. It was a really short trek that I went out into Boonville, North Carolina, and shot several old cars. But one of the things that I wanted to talk about here in this video was part of why I selected one of the images that I did. There was a whole lot of shooting, different isolations, different overall shots, and this one in particular that I just finished talking about in the blog represents 10 different frames to get just one image. And I've talked a lot about keeping only 10% of what I shoot on average, and this is just a perfect example of why. And I wanted to kind of go through the evolution of this shot so that you can see how it all worked out. Now, of course, from the day I shot 79 photos, you can see down here at the bottom, but what we're going to be looking at are going to be images 28 through 37. It's the front of an old Ford truck, and what I liked about this truck primarily was this tire off to the side that just, obviously very deflated, torn up. It just captures the mood of the truck. Hubcap's still in place. The moment that I started really looking at this was when the sun was coming out and it just happened to be illuminating this headlight bucket. For me, I always look at the headlights of these old vehicles like I would eyes of a portrait. So that just really captured my interest, and I wanted to spend a little bit of time, so I moved the camera over and tried to get a shot framed up that captured the headlight bucket, the hubcap, and the tire. Those were my main three things. This was the first composition that I came up with. Ultimately, I did not want to keep this one, and I'm going to talk about why. Everything here is pretty much in a straight line. We've got the tire, we've got the hubcap, we've got the headlight. It's just very static in just a straight line. For me, the light is a little bright over here on the headlight bucket. It's blowing out some of the trim stuff here. And just in general, it was a good concept, but I didn't like the angles. So what I ended up doing, I took another one just as the sunlight changed. We've got pretty much the same problem going on here. Again, not a very compelling composition. So I did look at different angles and came into this angle. And I lost the tire here, which was a shame, but I got kind of a variation on that line. I've got the hubcap here, the headlight has been moved up, there's a diagonal relationship. I've now got another diagonal relationship down to this little bumperette. I've got the grill that moves off to the upper right. We're starting to get a little bit more dynamic look to the composition, but I lost the tire, which was just not what I really wanted. But just in case, I took a safety like I had before, same basic exposure, light change. We don't have near the highlight here that we did originally. The sun had gone back behind the clouds, so the lighting was a little bit flatter at this point. I'm still trying to work out the composition, so I wasn't overly worried about lighting at this point. I just really needed to get a composition nailed out. Biggest problem with this one was I'd lost the tire, and the tire was very unique to this shot. So I repositioned again. I've got the tire. I've lost the other bumperette here. I've still got a nice diagonal relationship between the hubcap and the headlight bucket, which I did like. What I wasn't overly concerned about or wasn't overly happy about was the back of the truck, and I ended up getting the fender off of the bedside. So I needed to get something to pull the attention more towards the front. That's where the light came out. But generally speaking, I liked this composition. Now we're 5 shots into this series, and I've just now landed on a composition that I like. So now I'm waiting for the light to show up. So the next one, we had light, and you can see the shadow here. It's a little bit overexposed. I wasn't overly happy with this one. I tried to minimize the intrusion of this rear fender. I shot it at f4. I could have gone to 2.8, but I was afraid I'd lose the detail up here and here, so I kept it at f4, and that was still a little too soft here on the hubcap. So I ended up stopping the lens down to 5.6. This one is actually an edited version. This is the one that I ultimately ended up keeping. And what I liked about this, I had good depth of field. This was sharp enough. That's sharp. The tire's sharp. This was soft enough, and in the shadows, you can see where the sunlight was hitting the front here, which brought the interest up on this front part here, but this was not blown out. And just so you can see what I started with, the original capture was here. As you can see, the soft light, everything just really played into effect well here. And this is what I liked, and this is what I ended up going with. But I didn't stop here because I didn't know that this was going to be the best of the series. So I kept going, and the next shot that I did was at f8 because I wasn't sure I was going to have that depth of field that I needed. So I increased it a little bit more, brought that a little bit more into focus. Not bad. This is still a workable image. But what I didn't like about this was, even though I had good light here on the headlight bucket, this bumper was shining back too much light. So it became too overbearing in the picture and took too much attention away. So I didn't like that one. I kept going. Same kind of thing going here, although we have a nice vignetting coming in from the way the shadows were working. The headlight bucket still exposed just like I want. This is just a little bit too bright for what I was looking for. The last of the series, as you can see, the sun had gone back in just a little bit, but there's still a little bit of a highlight here, a little bit of a shadow here, all this giving depth, all of this exposed still correctly. And if you look down here, my star rating, this got a single star. So it was between this and the one that I ended up editing, which were my favorites. And it's because of the subtle qualities of light on the bumper. So in the end, this one worked out. And this, of course, is the final edit. But everything came together with what I wanted. I had the shadowing here with the highlights to show the depth. I had good exposure on the headlight bucket. I had a little bit of a shadow here with good exposure on the hubcap. The tire had sunlight on it, so it was able to expose with some interest and didn't just appear black. We have some gradually appearing shadows here on the back and a little bit of light shining through here, which helps take the interest away from this fender. So this is what I look for in my images, and it's why I take a string of images usually to get one. And this just turned out to be perfect. I threw 90% of these away. I kept 1 out of the 10, and it was the 7th in the series. So that's what we look for when it comes to what we're getting out of an image and why it is worthwhile to shoot it with several different lighting conditions, play with the exposure values, play with the angles. If you'll remember, when I first started out, the angle just didn't work. And my second variation on it, I didn't like this one because it's one of the parts that I really liked. So stick with the shots until you get the one that you want, and ideally go a little bit so you're sure to have it. Thank you for joining me, and I hope you read the blog, and it's going to be a 2-parter. This actually is attached to the first part. So subscribe, like, and all that good stuff, and we'll see you next time. Thank you for joining me.